Hello everyone and welcome back to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 11th of December 2024. I'm just going to hand over to the clerk to confirm everybody's still in attendance. Thank you.
Afternoon. We have an apology this afternoon for Councillor Illingworth, who will not be returning to the meeting this afternoon. And can we just double check that Councillor Harvey is online?
Yeah, I'm online now.
And that Councillor James is online.
Still here, Audrey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, move swiftly on to the next item on the agenda, which is 513, and it's for the erection of 292 dwelling houses, 48 flats, 28 detached garages, 3 retail units, a refuse bike store, and a sports changing pavilion, formation of leisure facilities, sud ponds, parking areas, landscaping associated works, phase 1, allocated site MU73, approval of matters specified in conditions 2100383 IPM, land adjacent to Hunton Tower Field and Ruthven Hunton Tower, Perth. And to introduce the report is Mr. Panton. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and I'm glad you had to read out that description rather than me. So as you've said, the next item on the agenda is at Ammon Valley, Perth. The site is allocated in the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2 and also benefits from planning permission in principle. The application before you today is an approval of matters for the planning permission in principle, and we are recommending approval. Members should note that there has already been an approval of matters granted on this site. However, this was granted to the Stuart Milne Group, and this current approval of matters is sought for Barratt Homes, who have since acquired the site. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. Here we have the location of the site. The site measures approximately 29.2 hectares and is to the northwest of Perth, adjoining Ruthven Field and Inveramond. The River Ammon flows to the northern boundary of the site, and the remaining boundaries facilitate residential properties, the Hunting Tower Hotel, dog kennels, business units and agricultural land. The site is also adjacent Double Dykes Residential Park, which is located to the northeast corner of Ruthven Field Road. Next slide, please. This is now an extract of the Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2, adopted in 2019, showing the site under question. As seen, the site is allocated as part of the wider MU73 designation. Next slide, please. This plan now shows the extent of the planning permission in principle for a mixed-use development that was granted. The application before you today constitutes only the northeasterly section of this site. Next slide, please. This plan shows the detailing that has already been approved for this section of the site for the former Stuart Milne Group. Your attention is drawn towards the general layout and arrangement of the scheme. Next slide, please. This plan now shows the detailing that is currently proposed as part of this application. As can be seen, the general layout and arrangement is broadly similar to that already approved. The main changes primarily relate to the design of the buildings to reflect Barratt Homes house types and styles. The section of the plan highlighted by the yellow arrow will be shown in greater detail on the next plan. Next slide, please. And here is that section in greater detail, showing where some of the retail units will be placed to form a commercial centre, in addition to a new crossing over the Townslade to allow an additional access into the site. Next slide, please. We now have a typical elevation drawing showing the 4-bedroom Ballater house type. Of the 340 residential units proposed, 255 will be for private sale and 85 will be affordable homes. Paragraph 5 of the reports before you detail the breakdown of these homes, showing there is a combination of 1, 2, 3 and 4-bedroomed homes. I will now take members through a series of recent photographs from my site visit last month. This first photograph shows one of the accesses to the site from the newly formed roundabout on Ruthven Field Road. This roundabout was created with an additional branch specifically to accommodate this development. Next slide, please. This image now shows the site when viewed looking towards Ammon Crescent. The sports pitches and pavilion will be located to the far right of this image. Next slide, please. This next photograph shows the site when pictured from the approximate location of the Hunting Tower Hotel, looking in a northeasterly direction. The building in the background The buildings in the background are waterside cottages, which are category B listed buildings. Next slide, please. This photograph shows the access track which leads to the adjacent dog kennels. The site is to the left of the hedge you can see. Next slide, please. This image shows where the development will connect into Almond Crescent and Bleachers Way. As seen, the roads in this existing development were designed to accommodate future growth. Next image, please. This image now shows the category C listed properties at Grey Row, which will adjoin the development. And final image, please. This final photograph shows the approximate location of the retail centre, which is to the left of the path here. The listed properties at Grey Row can also be seen in the background. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. We do have deputations on this, so I will hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Can I call on Mr. Perman Charles? Good afternoon. You were here this morning. I'm sure you know the procedure. Good. I'll start the clock for 3 minutes whenever you're ready, and I'll give you a prompt of when there's 1 minute to go. So in your own time.
Is that on? Yeah. Thank you, convener. Thank you, committee. It's great to be here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. First off, I'd just like to say I recognise the need for housing. People need homes, and I'm not against that. However, I do have some specific objections to the development in question. However, I wish to be constructive and proactive in my criticism, and I hope that comes across in what I say. I'm amalgamating a number of my written points which I submitted, and I'm paraphrasing some stuff too due to time constraints. I think there's potentially an opportunity being missed here. There's some fantastic examples of sustainable, community-centric, well-serviced developments being built across the UK that are winning awards for their sort of forward thinking. This committee has the opportunity to set expectations for similar with this development. I think it would be a missed opportunity to approve another car-centric urban sprawl development, especially in light of PKC declaring a climate emergency and other factors like that. In addition, there are multiple visions for playing fields and other sports-centric community spaces. However, what about for people who aren't involved in sports, who aren't interested in sports? It'd be great to have other spaces available for people from the community to come together. This could be allotments, community gardens, an orchard, social workshop spaces for people to learn and share skills together, a community hall. These things do appear to be missing, and these are things that would really be great to see, where people from a diverse group of backgrounds and abilities and ages can actually come together and develop as a community. I'd really like to see something along these lines, but I also like sport, don't get me wrong. I have a few specific concerns with the area planned for development. 2 reasons mainly. Firstly is the loss of productive agricultural land at a time where the need for domestically produced food is increasingly clear for environmental and food security reasons. Secondly, large areas of the development are in areas of medium to high risk of river flooding. This is not a problem that will go away. I work on the River Tay system for my job. This is going to get worse. No worries. I do not think it is necessarily wise to build in these areas. I used to live in Brecon. We saw the impacts of what river can have on developments near the river line last winter. And lastly, in the design and access statement, designs were shown for a football pitch and village green in the field between Grey Row and Tarry Row. Our septic tank, and sorry for those of you who already know me, have 3 access hatches in this field. These hatches need to be dug up and exposed to do repair and unblocking works at times. It would heavily limit what could be done in this area in terms of development, and if it was a playing field, that field might have to get dug up. Just lastly, there's a little bit of lack of clarity in terms of what is indeed happening to the westward side of I live on the grade C listed row that was mentioned. It was initially planned to be houses. That's been dropped, which we're pleased to see. There's potentially local units, school. We're not really sure what's going on. So the Grey Row community would really appreciate being able to have some engagement, have some discussion about what's happening on each side of the row, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you for listening. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Mr. Perman, Charles, are you happy to take questions from members?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Members could populate the chat function. Councillor Braun.
Come here. Thank you, Vice Convener. Finally, I can talk. Thank you for the presentation. You said that you had no objection to housing there. So if we look at the map we've got on the screen, I mean, what would you prefer to see there? Is it less numbers or less houses, or how would you see it planned out?
I think I don't object to houses in principle. I think I just object to the way these houses are being built. We've had a Barratt Homes development built just up the road from us, and I feel it is not housing built for the times we're living in now. This is an antiquated way of looking at housing developments. I think there are more sustainable and more innovative things we could be doing to create communities rather than a collection of houses with people driving backwards and forwards to services in town. I feel like there's better ways of doing it. That's sort of where I'm coming from. I don't disagree with the principle of people having homes. That's certainly not what I'm here to do.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. We've got obviously the plan up on there. So how would you see that being different, very roughly?
Well, I think, for example, this is a heavily car-centric development. This is part of a larger development. There's multiple phases that will be coming. I think there is, within the larger planning application for these 3 phases, there's not a great deal of local services and things that people can actually use and rely on within the area. We're already not particularly well served in the Hunting Tower, Ruthenfield area. We're quite isolated. It'd be great to have more local shops, services, whatever that might be. GPs are already under stress, those sorts of things. I'd like to see some capacity building in addition to housing, because obviously we need housing, but we need the things that people want to come and live here for as well. I feel just a collection of houses without those extra bits that create a community is a missed opportunity.
Just a very quick question. Grey Row, is that down on the southeast part on that map, roughly? Yes. Just there. Right. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks for your deputation. Interesting comments, actually. My question is pretty much a follow-on from Councillor Braun's, which is where we are, Grey Row. You're saying that you need access to your septic tank. With the map that's, I'm hoping it's on the screen in front of you, could you point or could you tell us whereabouts your septic tank is in relation to your house? Is it within the building area, if you like, or, you know?
Yeah, sorry for the people who've dealt with this before already. Is it possible to get the map up again? I can't see what I'm describing. No criticism of you. I just there we go. Yeah, so basically what you've got is the 22 properties of Grey Row are serviced by a communally owned septic tank. The septic tank itself is under the existing football pitch. However, the field, the field to the immediate right, or I guess east of the football pitch, between Grey Row and Tarry Row, there is a runoff from the septic tank, which then joins Tarry Row's runoff and then disappears into Perth somewhere. That runoff runs through the field, and there are 3 access hatches to access the pipe running through that field from the football pitch towards Tarry Row. They are submerged about 1/2 foot under the ground, and the pipe is about 4 to 5 feet below that, accessed by these 3 access hatches. So obviously, if there is an issue and blockages, we have to essentially hire a mini digger, dig up these hatches, excavate, open the hatches, and undertake rodding and repair activities. So obviously, if something did go on this field, it would put us in a very difficult position, because we couldn't be liable for. We need to access this, otherwise sewage comes back into our houses essentially. So that's the point there. It's not the septic tank itself. It's the runoff of the septic tank for the drainage system which is attached, and then foul water too.
Okay,
Apologies
thank
for
you
it.
very
Sorry.
much for that. That's what was confusing for me. So thank you.
Apologies for interrupting. Where the cursor was, the football pitch down on that's kind of in the centre, is that's the football pitch?
Yes, so you've got Grey Road, then immediately behind us are our gardens, and then there is an existing football pitch, and then there is the field beyond that. So yes, there is already a football pitch there, and they're looking to, obviously within the designs proposed, more football pitches, playing fields and stuff in addition on that. But that second field is where our access hatches are. We don't have any access hatches under the existing football pitch, so they remain undisturbed if we do have issues.
But that's actually outside the proposed development.
Is it? Okay, well that's
The
it.
red line is-
I wasn't sure. I know there was stuff planned for future
Okay.
phases, so that's what I may have become confused as to
Okay.
what phase that was, but there are things proposed for that down
Okay,
the
thank
line.
you.
Thank you.
Haley Williamson.
Thank you. It's discuss sewage again, and I was just wondering if there's an opportunity there for you to speak to the developer to see if you can't get your, I think from memory it was 1960 sewage plant or 80 sewage plant connected to the mains within the development. If that's an opportunity you could exploit yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm sort of here on behalf of the community as well, and we'd really welcome dialogue and discussions about this sort of thing. So absolutely, that's something we'd be open to. We'd really like engagement on that for sure.
Councillor Allen. Mr. Perman, Charles, there's no further questions. Thank you for your time. Free to go. Could I call on Mr. Graham, agent? Good afternoon. You've got 3 minutes for your deputation. I'll give you a reminder after 2 minutes, and I'll start the clock whenever you're ready.
Thank you. On behalf of Barrett David Wilson Homes, I'd like to thank both the officers of the council and other statutory agencies and consultees for their positive engagement during the determination period of this application on this allocated site. We've been pleased particularly to liaise with the Community Council and have committed to ongoing dialogue as matters progress. In particular, the house types chosen to the rear of Almond Crescent and Bleachers Way have been welcomed, and assurances with regards to construction traffic and on-site working hours have been given. One important matter has been with regards to construction traffic not using the local road network, and Barrett remained committed to using a route from the Bertha Park roundabout instead. We're also delighted to speak today with a recommendation for approval and to potentially commence development of this important allocated site to deliver for housing for Perth in the coming years. In addition, delivery of Almond Valley will help provide new housing. In turn, this will help tackle the national housing emergency. The nature of this application is relatively simple. Swapping permitted house types of Stuart Mill Homes and others for Barrett David Wilson Homes. This allows Barrett the platform to formally take over site delivery from Stuart Mill, who are evidently no longer operational. There's also been a need to tweak the road layouts to recognise physical infrastructure work undertaken on site by utilities companies since the last permission was granted. What has not changed is the proposals for the previously approved open space and planting framework, the play facilities, sports facilities, the local centre, and other placemaking considerations. As such, the established principles for the delivery of this part of the Almond Valley site remain as desired. In particular, the discrete housing parcels framed by new tree planting and the extensive open space corridor at the north of the site, which features sports facilities, informal and formal play, an orchard, and connections to the wider path network. Both Barrett and David Wilson home types will be constructed on site, and low and zero carbon generation has been actively considered to make these homes energy efficient and well insulated. There will also be a range of house sizes from 1 bed to 4 bed, and significant effort has been made to incorporate council policies in relation to garden sizes and accessibility. 25% of the properties will be affordable, and discussions are active with a provider for these homes. In summary, Barrett and David Wilson are committed to making this part of Almond Valley a sustainable and livable new development to benefit Perth for years to come. Many thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Are you happy to take questions from members?
Yes.
Haley Williamson.
Thank you. It's on the back of my last question to the, let me see, Mark, about the commitment to engage with you about the connection of the Grey Road houses to your sewage system, the main sewage system. Is that something you could commit to doing?
Yeah, I believe a discussion could take place on that.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Mr. Graham, Mr. Purnell Charles spoke before you and he suggested that there were awards being awarded up and down the UK for just having a different thought about developments. Do you think that there's anything new that you could incorporate into that to make it more attractive to people with such a mind?
Well, I think we're very hopeful that this is a positive development, which is in line with placemaking considerations of placemaking policies that the council have. I've pointed out in my statement there that the Northern Open Space Corridor, which will be a multifunctional corridor, which will provide not only the sports facilities but also the opportunity for younger children to play. It'll have the orchards, which will allow for community food growing, and it'll just have path connections onto the river there. I would also point out, in terms of local facilities, local services, there is a local centre, which one of the slides zoomed in on, that has 3 units within it that could be used for multiple purposes. They'll kind of be left as a shell which people could come in and take. So, yeah. So I think we hopefully are providing a good development here.
Haley McLaren.
Got there in the end. Right, yes, thank you. Again, Mr. Charles made comments in his deputation regarding other community needs, such as community halls, community gardens, allotments. This is maybe not, I'm presuming this is something that you couldn't consider at this point, given that you've taken over a half-baked application. But is this something that you will add to your considerations for future phasing of this development?
I think you're right. As you say, this application picks up on a permission that's already there to allow Barrett to swap in. I mean, perhaps one for Christian and Sean, but as we've mentioned, Almond Valley is a bigger site. It's a bigger allocation. This is one element of a bigger allocation. I can't speak for future phases, but I would imagine there is the potential for further local facilities to come in later phases in Almond Valley. The local centre is there. There's the prospect of a primary school at some point. There may be the prospect for further facilities to come. But again, I couldn't stand here today because I'm not representing the rest of the landowning. But there is that potential in the local development plan.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Thank you for your presentation. The commercial element that we talked about at the bottom, are they going to be for retail, or is it going to be just units that people you buy, non-retail units, or what's the plan for those?
They're relatively flexible. They could be retail. They could be another use. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the use classes precisely that have been applied for. But yeah, there's multiple options for those.
They could be shops, and obviously for like a small village effect.
Yeah, they could be shops. Yeah.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Thanks for your deputation today, so thank you. My question, I was trying to look through our officer's report about noise, because you've got AD kennels at the bottom end of your site, and the noise assessment was done from the kennels towards your properties. But are you putting any measures in place to prevent noise going to the kennels, which would antagonise dogs that are kept there? Thank you.
In short, yes. I know that that's come up before. There's I think it's a 2.5 meter acoustic fence as noise mitigation. So that's catered for.
Convener Massey.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. As you are no doubt well aware, Double Dykes Scottish Travellers site is right next door to what is your site. I'd like to know what equality policy Barratt have in regard to Scottish Travellers, or in regards to equality.
I'll have to apologise there. I don't know what equality policy they have. Yeah, I can't comment any further.
Mr. Graham, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, if there's no further deputations, I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Can I ask, do members have questions for officers? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. And following on from your question, really, I'd like to ask if officers have been in touch with any of the residents at Double Dykes. One of the objectors, or two of them, I think, have written in saying that there haven't been any consultations whatsoever with them, or if we have spoken to them. They obviously have their own rights.
Thanks, Councillor Braun. So first of all, because this is an approval of matters application, the consultation was taken out through the original in principle application. However, I would comment as well that it is the majority of the objectors to this application are from the Double Dykes residential park. It's more than two of you, as you suggested. But we have taken on board their comments, as we do everyone who submits a comment, and we've arrived at this conclusion. But like I say, it's because this is an approval of matters, the developer isn't obliged to do the consultation that they'd have to do for the in principle.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions? No? Okay, can I ask for a motion? Bailey McLaren.
Yes, Convener, thank you. I would just like to propose the application as per the papers in front of us and as per the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. Do we have any amendment? No amendment. Do members wish to comment on the report? Councillor James. Councillor James.
Thanks very much, Convener. I noticed Bailey McLaren was before me, but I'll take it because she's proposed the motion. I'm a little. I can see why we approve this, and yes, we're desperate for housing, and like all of these big applications today, at what cost? This site is. It was passed by Scottish Government, if my memory serves me right, which we'd refused in the first place. It's in the wrong place, if I'm honest, right next to the River Almond. I know we've just had flood defences done upstream, but there's older properties, and the title of it gives it away, Hunting Tower Field. It's another historical site that we're building on again. Very sad, but I get that we have to pass it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. It's just in relation to the deputation that was made earlier on, and I think Councillor Bailey Williamson also asked the question. It'd be really helpful if the developer could talk to the people down in that row. They were also here earlier on this week at licensing with regards to their septic tank, and if we can get them fed into a proper sewer, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comment. Bailey McLaren, do you wish to sum up?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, just to sum up in that, yes, we are all recognising housing needs within Perthshire and the positivity these will bring to our area and the economic impact that this will have, positive economic impact. But it would be, creating our communities is really important. So for future developments, it would be heartening to see more of a consideration given to the peripheral of community needs other than sports areas, such as suggested in deputation allotments, community gardens, community halls. These are really important parts of developing our communities, but this is the first step, and it's great to see that this will be able to progress very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As there is no amendment and the motion was for approval, planning permission is therefore granted in line with the conditions set in the report of handling. Thank you. Okay, we now move on to next application 514, which is for an S42 application to vary condition 17 road safety of permission 2300224 FLM land 300 metres northwest of Lathrow Farm, Kinross, and to introduce a report as Mr. Panton. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. The final major item on the agenda today is a Section 42 application for Persimmon Homes, Kinross. The application seeks to amend the wording of Condition 17 to allow for the developer to delay the introduction for a traffic signal controlled junction at the Muirs and the C495. The amendment seeks to alter the requirement from the 97th dwelling house to the 120th dwelling house. This is due to the ongoing gasworks in Kinross, which are preventing the developer from getting on site to start the works on the junction. I will now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. The first plan shows the location of the site. The red area notes the development itself, and the yellow circle denotes the junction to be upgraded, which is next to the Lochleven campus. Next slide, please. Here we have a proposed site plan for the development under question. This is largely irrelevant here as it has already been approved. It is more just to give members context of the development we are referring to. Next slide, please. This first photograph shows the existing crossing at the junction, which leads to Lochleven campus. Next image, please. This next photograph shows the existing junction with the Muirs, which will still remain to be upgraded through the granting of this application. Next image, please. Again, we have the same junction, this time looking back towards it from the Muirs. And final image, please. This final photograph shows some of the ongoing gasworks which are preventing the upgrade of the junction happening at this time. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the location plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Cuthbert.
It's really a point of clarification, but in terms of if we refuse this application, does that mean they have to do the works immediately, or does it change something else?
So as they're already above the threshold of the original condition, if the application was refused today, then it would constitute a breach of condition. So our enforcement team would then have to look at that and whether it would be reasonable or not to serve a breach of condition notice.
But maybe to answer your question more directly, no, they wouldn't have to do it straight away. In fact, they can't do it straight away because there are already programmed works in that location that they can't get access to the road at this time. And what they're looking to do is to defer it until they can get access, which would be after the works that are being undertaken. And I understand that that's in March.
Thank you. Thank you. No further questions?
Yes, just to advise members as well, you'll have seen there was an update circulated just with an additional 2 informatives and a typo. So if you're recommending approval, it would be in line with that update that was circulated.
Okay. Right, can I ask for a motion? I see Councillor Cuthbert's already in there again.
Keen to get this over with, eh? Yeah, just to say I would like to see this approved and subject to the amendments that were distributed to everybody. The sooner this is done, the better. The amount of new building work that's happened in North Kinross and in Milnathorpe means that junction is incredibly busy.
Thank you. And I see that Councillor Allen is happy to second.
I am indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask if there's an amendment? No amendment. Can I ask if members have any comments on the report? No comments. No amendments. So planning permission is therefore granted, subject to the new informatives that have been expressed, sent out this morning. Thank you. And the change of conditions. Thank you. Okay, then we move on. We move on to the local applications now. And the first local application is for the erection of 8 dwelling houses, formation of vehicle access, drainage and associated landscaping land 30 metres north of Dean's Oak, McClure. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Convener. And the first local application on the agenda today, as you say, relates to the development of a site within the settlement boundary of McClure for the provision of a total of 8 dwelling houses. This application has been referred to committee today in light of the receipt of 12 letters of representation, which relate to a number of concerns which are outlined in paragraph 33 of the report, which included policy considerations over the scale of development, noise and light pollution, flood risk, conservation considerations, road safety and ecology, amongst others. As it's outlined within the report, it is considered that this site, which forms white land within the settlement boundary, would always come through for development during the planned period. Following a number of physical and technical considerations, is now considered to be supportable, subject to the conclusion of planning obligations. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. This first plan shows the location of the site. Next slide, please. Next, we see a slightly enhanced aerial image showing the relationship of the site to the wider settlement, including the neighbouring streets, Mercer Green and the Row. It also shows the associated distance to the McClure Arms. It also shows the adjacent watercourse flowing northwards between the site and the neighbouring fields. Next slide, please. Here we have a proposed site plan for the development. This shows the access being taken from the old military road to the south, leading to the courtyard-esque layout of bungalows, which would comprise 4 of 1 bedroom and a further 4 of 2 bedrooms. Next slide, please. The next image shows the street view section to the bottom and wider sections above. Next slide, please. We now have the respective elevations for the various dwelling types, which range from 1 to 2 bedrooms, as I mentioned. Externally, they would be finished with white dash render, white timber glaze units and slate roofs. Next slide, please. Lastly, we now see the drainage layout. And I'll now take members through a series of site photographs taken recently by the planning case officer. Next slide, please. This first photograph shows the view westwards from the old military road, looking back towards McClure. The position of the car is at the approximate entrance point. Next image, please. These next photographs show the view west in slightly greater detail on the left, and then the view eastwards on the right, showing the area characterised by the tree-lined road and the good visibility in either direction. Next image, please. Next, we see the approximate entrance point to the site. The tree on the left would be removed to accommodate the site access, although it is of a much smaller scale than many more of the mature specimen in the vicinity. Next image, please. These respective photos show the view westwards towards the nearest properties, Dean's Oak on the left and 7 Mercer Green on the right. The second photo shows the pathway which extends northwards through the site. Next slide, please. These final images show the existing watercourse at the eastern boundary of the site on the left, and then the view southwards towards Old Military Road on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation, and I'll leave members with the site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. Can I ask the members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, convener. I noticed that all the properties were going to have air source heat pumps on them. I know there's a condition about noise, but have you actually checked any assessment of the potential noise for these things? Bear in mind, there'll be, what, 8 of them?
Thank you for the query. Certainly from our experience, and certainly relying upon the input of our environmental health colleagues, most of the air source heat pumps nowadays fit within the guidelines and the criteria that we set forward in the condition. So I'd be relatively confident that they would be able to adhere to that going forward.
Yeah, maybe just as an addendum, that is a point that we have debated at some length internally, and we've come to the conclusion that there's no longer a requirement, given our experience, to apply a condition in relation to that, unless there are perhaps new or different or excessive scale number of air source heat pumps, such that we would think that it would be beyond what the normal scenario is. It's also worth noting that retrospective fitting of air source heat pumps and the such like is now encouraged through permitted development rights, and there is a standard applicable to that, and almost all manufactured air source heat pumps would comply, so it's unlikely that there would be an issue for this now fairly standard form of providing heating to properties. It's also the case that in building regulations that you can no longer use combustion systems, and in effect means that an air source heat pump would be required. So the issue of noise is sort of something that we're no longer thinking is a significant issue.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Braun.
Yeah, so I was going to wait to see if somebody else came in, but we did. Paragraph 2 makes it clear the proposal is to provide accommodation of employees working at McClure Farms and the McClure Arms Hotel, so it's for staff. I'm just wondering, can we put a condition in to say that it is only for staff and not to be used for any other purpose? I appreciate that if you wanted to change, you would need planning permission. I understand that, but you know, they want it for staff. I think that should be a built and braces thing in here to say it is for staff.
Thank you again. Certainly from our perspective, the application is for dwelling houses on the open market. It's not restricted to staff accommodation at all. So ultimately, they could be used for anyone going forward. So we've certainly not intended to restrict it on that basis. It is a white land proposal within an existing settlement boundary. So from that perspective, development of land use for housing purposes is fine. So we haven't sought to restrict it any further than that.
I'm not quite clear because they've requested this for staff accommodation. I mean, there's potential they could turn it into short-term lets or rent it. I just wonder if there should be a condition here. If they want, that's what they want, fine, we put it in, that's done. If they want subsequently to change it, then they'd have to come back for a variation of planning. I'm going from what some of the objectors were raised about this, that although it's supposed to be for staff accommodation, it could turn up being for short-term lets. Well, I know they need a license.
I think that the situation is that it's indicated that the intention of the applicant is to use it for their staff, but in effect, in terms of land use planning considerations or the use class or type of accommodation, it's housing. They can use it however they wish. Obviously, they will be they own the land, they're going to be constructing the houses, and they're indicating the intention is to house their staff, and that they have some issues in terms of doing that at the minute, and this is a solution to it. But from our perspective, we are considering it as open market housing and are not proposing any control on top of that. But to an extent, in effect, it will be affordable housing for the estate in themselves. In terms of short-term let, that's a separate matter, and we would have to consider whether or not that required planning permission, which may or may not be the case.
So sorry, there's nobody coming behind me. So just my last question, promise. But as a committee, we could ask that condition to be put in. Is that right?
I think that a condition saying it shall not be used as short-term let accommodation.
So it's a condition that's for staff accommodation only. I might misread it. It's getting close to the microphone, so I'm not sure. Could we ask for that condition to be put in? That's what I'm basically saying, for staff accommodation only.
I'm hesitant. I think you have to be careful because there's the law of unintended consequences. I'm aware, not so much staff accommodation, but other types of accommodation. If you put that restriction on, they may not be able to. I don't know the answer to this, but they may not be able to get the finance to build, so they would just come back to you to remove it. But Mr. Smith is explaining that they've assessed it as ordinary wetland. Where I would go further forward is if the same applicant came back at a later stage for another site looking for workers' accommodation, then I think you would be taking this into account, saying, well, why are you doing that when you had this? But that's for the future. That's not for this one.
I think as well that the difference here is, as Mr. Williamson pointed out, that this is a site within a settlement boundary where the principle of housing is acceptable. So we're not approving this only because it is workers' accommodation. So it's not necessarily in that sense. In any case, the Chief Reporter of Scottish Government issued a letter a number of years ago saying that we shouldn't be applying conditions such as that because we should be satisfying ourselves whether or not proposals of that type are required in relation to the proper functioning of the business, so for workers' accommodation. But that's not the case here. And again, as Mr. Elliott has said as well, there could be unintended consequences that would limit the occupation of housing in an area where housing is acceptable without it being tied in any way.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to get the clarification. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask if members have a comment on the report? No comment. Can I ask for a motion? Oh, sorry, Councillor James, you want to comment?
Yes, sorry, convener. I was late getting the button pressed. Yeah, I can see where Councillor Braun was coming from on this, but I think to restrict it in a location such as McClure would be too restrictive. So I'm happy with going what the officers were saying in the first place, to be honest. And for the objections, there's no planning considerations, I think, that we can reject it on. People just don't like houses next to them, but this is actually an extension of what's already there if you look at it practically. So I'm quite supportive of this, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Bailey McLaren, you want to put forward a motion?
Yes, thank you, convener. I do. I would just like to put forward a motion set out in the papers as per recommended by our officers. This is an application that is supportive of employment in rural areas and is supporting an agricultural rural business with diversification aspects set within it. So it's a positive application. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Braun, you want to second?
Yeah, but I'm happy to say I've never really had any objection to the application at all. Really, it was just to clarify that point, and thankfully the three officers have now clarified that for me. So, thank you very much for future reference. Cheers.
Thank you. Can I ask if there's an amendment? No amendment. Thank you. Therefore, planning permission is granted. You. Okay, moving on. Next one's 522, which is the erection of 2 dwelling houses and garage, formation of vehicle access and associated works at land 65 metres northwest of Green Hotel, 2 Muirs, Kinross, and to introduce a report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you again. Next application for consideration today relates to a site to the northwest of the Green Hotel off the Muirs in Kinross. The site forms part of a walled garden which had been utilised for tennis courts but has been abandoned for some time. The proposal under consideration relates to the erection of 2 detached dwelling houses of single storey within the walled garden and the formation of a new vehicular access through to the Muirs. This application has been referred to committee in light of the receipt of 10 letters of representation, including one from the Kinross Shire Civic Trust. The reason for objecting are outlined in paragraph 30, but largely relate to the overdevelopment of the site, impacts on visual amenity, impacts in the conservation area, and loss of open space. As outlined in the report, it is considered that the proposal as revised is an acceptable solution for this site within the settlement boundary, and that by virtue of its scale and location would be an appropriate addition subject to the settlement of developer obligations and a number of conditions. I'll now take members through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. First, we see the location of the site, just off the Muirs in Kinross, north of the Greens Hotel and also the curling rink, with the Sycamores residential care home beyond to the north. Next slide, please. Here we have an enhanced aerial image, which again shows the walled garden centrally located between the curling rink and the retirement home. As members will see, it's set back from the Muirs by some distance, and obviously the shadow of the existing wall is shown. Next slide, please. Here we have a proposed site plan. This shows the access that's been taken from the Muirs and where a number of trees have been taken down, albeit that has been undertaken by the separate landowner and is under investigation by our colleagues in enforcement. Notwithstanding, the alignment of the road leading up to the walled garden is acceptable, and obviously you can see the 2 detached dwellings centrally located. Next slide, please. Here we have the elevations of the intended dwellings on site. As members will note, they are hip roof style, comprising slate roofs, and also feature stonework, keep the proposals relatively low scale. Next slide, please. Again, we just have some more artist visuals from the agent showing how the development would fit in. Next slide, please. Again, we've got some further axonometric plans which show it from an elevated view. Next slide, please. This is the site access arrangements that we've got before us. This shows both the provision of the new gate piers leading into the site and the lowering of the existing boundary wall either side in order to create the visibility splays. Next slide, please. And then here we have the drainage layout that has been tabled. I'll now run through a selection of site photos taken by the officer recently. Next slide, please. As you'll see, we have some drone footage, again undertaken by the agent. This shows the extent of the walled garden area sandwiched between the curling rink and the adjacent retirement home. As members will note, the tennis courts are quite overgrown and its unkempt appearance. Next slide, please. We now have some views from the Muirs itself. So the views at the top are showing the approach past the Green Hotel. Top right is showing the approximate position of the access leading through, and then the bottom right is showing where the access would come through and where some of the trees have been removed. Next slide, please. This is a view from the car park of the Green Hotel, looking up to the walled garden itself. You can just see the tops of the fairly contemporary residential care home on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. Again, just some of the detailing of the walled garden, some of the features of which would be retained, and new gate provision through, and then again showing the extent and scale of the care home to the north. Next slide, please. Lastly, in reviewing the circulated reports, it was noted that condition 6 relating to the landscaping condition had omitted the requirement to replace landscaping which fails or dies within the first 5 years. So should members be minded to approve this application, then we would be looking to update that condition so as to account for that scenario. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We do have deputations on this, so I'll hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call Mr. Codry, agent to the application? Mr. Codry, you have 3 minutes for your deputation. I'll give you a prompt after 2 minutes. So whenever you're ready to start, I'll start the clock.
Hi, yes, thanks for having me today. I'm here on behalf of the agent, Oliver and Rob. Oh, thank you. I'm here on behalf of Oliver and Rob Architects today, so thanks for having us. We've had extensive discussions with the planning department on this development, going back to September 2023, where a pre-application inquiry was submitted to set out the relevant policies and associated suitability of the proposals. Through that process, attention was drawn to LDP 2 Policy 17, where proposals will be encouraged where they satisfy the criteria set out in the policy. In particular, infill residential development at a density which represents the most efficient use of the site whilst respecting its environment. Proposals will improve the character and environment of the area. The existing walled garden, whilst unlisted, does make a significant contribution to the historic character and appearance of the conservation area, and we acknowledge that. However, as noted in the report, it's suffering from a lack of maintenance. The site itself has become somewhat overgrown, having lain idle for some time, and it is not designated currently as open space. The development serves to restore and enhance the existing wall and ensure its longevity and contribution to the future. The existing wall to the Muirs, which we're having to alter to form the access, that has come from the visibility display of 2.4 by 43 metres. We did look to seek a relaxation for that because it's a similar visibility as is proposed for the adjacent site, which serves 53 number flatted developments. The transportation department were keen for us to undertake a speed survey, which we did, and it came back and they decided that the visibility display as proposed should be maintained. So that's the reasoning behind these proposals. There was question at one point over why we could not take access through the Green Hotel car park, but seeing as that's third party land, that isn't considered viable for the impact that could have commercially on the existing use of that site. Okay, thank you. Furthermore, our initial proposals, given the surrounding context, was for 2-storey dwellings. However, through discussion with the planning department, this was revised to bungalows with the support of the department, and this further enhanced by the use of traditional slate roofs. The proposed courtyard setting within a walled garden represents a highly sustainable solution which incorporates the 2 dwellings. This reduces energy consumption through the insulation standards, robust detailing and materials, and the use of renewable energies to reduce CO2 emissions and contribute positive to the climate change and ongoing crisis. Architecturally, the 2 contemporary dwellings have been designed which are reflective and respectful of the local context and the mass scale and form of the traditional villas within the local area. The redevelopment, which has easy access to local amenities and wider transport network, underpins local and national objectives for sustainable development and has aspirations, aims and objectives of Births, Kinross. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Are you willing to take questions from members?
Yes, indeed.
Members, could you populate the chat function? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. You mentioned the visibility display on the entrance to the site. How many car parking spaces will that remove from the MEOs?
There's no designated car parking space on the MEOs, and within the report, the Transportation Department had no concerns over the loss of any parking spaces there, accepted that there will potentially be informal on-street parking, but it wasn't considered a concern as part of the report.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but how many spaces would that take? Because people do park down there fairly regularly.
Well, the opening in the wall itself across there is about 7.5 meters. So if you take a parking bay at 5 meters, you potentially have a loss of 2 spaces.
Thank you.
Councillor Braun.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. There's the McCarthy Stone development just to the north of you. I'm just wondering, have you considered any noise concerns that might affect that building? I know there's a wall in front of it, obviously, but their floors are higher up, of course, than yours. I just wonder if that's something you've considered.
Yeah, it was considered through the design. You can see we're actually offset from it, but in reality, the distances associated with that site, that won't be an issue. Any noise issues that could occur will actually be associated with the new properties and the existing curling rink to the south of the site, and the impact of any events at the Green Hotel. So these properties would have to be designed to ensure that the internal environment is maintained in cognizance of the adjacent activities.
So it's just supplementary. I was thinking about the noise of the houses, people living in the new houses, affecting the McCarthy Stone residents, because obviously their story, they're higher than the wall, so they would hear sounds.
No, we don't consider that to be. They're set back well beyond the 9 meters that you would typically expect, and the gardens are located to the southern side of the site as well. So hopefully that should overcome any issues. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thanks, Mr. Caldry. I just wonder, are you able to make any comment about the unauthorised loss of trees?
Fortunately, I'm not. That was undertaken by the landowner out with our remit on this development. So we were aware of it. We were in discussions with it, and I understand that responsibility for the supplementary planting that was going to be undertaken will be done.
Mr. Caldry, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputation, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Can I ask committee members whether they have questions for officers? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. Just really the same question. I was wondering if there's what was suggested that there's enforcement looking into the removal of trees. I just wonder what's the significance of those trees being removed and how it impacts on this.
Thank you very much. Certainly the loss of any mature specimen trees within a location such as this in a conservation area is clearly unfortunate, and I'll put that microphone down as well, CC me. As it has been alluded to both in the report and by myself verbally, those trees were taken down separately by the adjacent landowner. It's something that we're actively following up. In this instance, we've got to assess the planning application on its merits. The red line site boundary of this is drawn quite tightly in respect of what's within the applicant's control. So we would not be in a position to actively pursue the applicant for the replacement of those trees, when in actual fact the planting scheme that should be there to replace that lost is the responsibility of the adjacent landowner. So, we are confident that we will actively follow up upon that to ensure that there's appropriate compensation going forward.
Yeah, follow up on that. Yeah, so Councillor Allen, sorry, I'll just maybe supplement that. Yes, we were made aware of it. We've been looking at it, and we will take whatever action we feel is necessary. Initial or preliminary investigation has found that a number of the trees were not in the greatest of condition, but notwithstanding that, permission should have been sought from us given the conservation area status. And as we've said, we're speaking with the relevant party to make sure that they are aware of future obligations, but also that we achieve compensatory planting for the loss.
You just come back, yeah. Thank you for that. I'm just wondering from the drawing, and I did ask about the significance of the trees that have gone. Were they cut down to facilitate any of this? That's what I'm really trying to get to.
It's not a question that I can answer. Obviously, the landowner is the one who could answer that question. But certainly we've just got to assess the application on its own specific merits at this time. And as I say, we'll follow up in respect of seeking appropriate compensation thereafter.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert, you have 2 questions. There's no one after you, so just ask both.
Okay, thank you. First question is a daft laddie question maybe, but this sits within the conservation area, I understand. So is there going to be a conservation application, or how's that being dealt with?
No, there would be no requirement for a conservation application, as it doesn't constitute any form of development, demolition, etc., that we would seek conservation area consent for. So in this instance, it's solely planning permission that's required.
Yeah, conservation area consent is only required for certain demolition works within a conservation area. So buildings of a certain size, etc., which is not the case here.
Okay, my understanding is that part of the wall is to be demolished to create an entrance. Is that not a demolition within a conservation area?
I think it's something around 115 cubic meters of demolition is required before we would seek an application, and it will be nowhere near that level.
Yeah, so if it falls below the threshold and doesn't relate to a building either.
Okay, my other question is relating to the parking on the Muirs. As I say, parking in Kinross is quite tight. It's getting tighter all the time. I was told 2 car parking spaces. Further along the road at the McCarthy and Stone, the Sycamores, where the council's having to pay for build-outs to allow the residents to exit onto the Muirs because it's a busy street. Is that something that we should be looking to incorporate into this as a condition, that those are built into the display?
I think from my perspective, the usage associated with 2 residential properties in comparison to the use of the wider care home would be quite a significant difference in levels that would be, linked to those trips. Don't know whether Carlin wishes to come in from the roads perspective and highlight whether any other build outs or waiting restrictions were considered.
Thank you for the question, Paul. No, they weren't considered as part of this application, and the 2 parking bays were not considered not 2 parking bays, but the potential equivalent of the loss of 2 bays were not considered significant in terms of their loss due to bus services being available and other surrounding car parking being available. But yes, so to answer your question, no, those weren't considered.
If I may come back, just is it a condition that we could put into accepting moving this paper, but add in a condition that build-out should be incorporated at that entrance? Because I hear what you're saying about the number of vehicles, but the Sycamores, there isn't actually a huge amount of traffic because most people are quite elderly and don't go out very often, if you like. And is it 8 parking bays with these 2 houses? So there could be a fairly heavy usage. So I'm just seeing whether we can actually put that in as a condition, whether that would be competent.
I think maybe exploring this a little with you, that my understanding is that section of the Muirs has dedicated parking on the opposite side of the road, and then there are 2 lanes of traffic that travel back and forward. They are not particularly wide lanes of traffic. If we were to undertake build outs on that side, it would effectively potentially make it a one-way, so you'd have to wait to allow traffic to clear to move around any build outs. I don't think there would be enough space to accommodate that. My second point would be, and I absolutely understand that people are concerned in relation to being able to park easily whenever they enter into a town or city. However, we need to focus on sustainable modes of transport, and the car, unfortunately, for some falls at the bottom of that list, and we should not be seeking to accommodate private car use as a priority. So I think there are a number of reasons that it may be difficult to achieve that, and would have to investigate whether it was even possible, therefore competent to apply a condition that might have significant impacts on the free flow of traffic.
Just to say that the council is currently putting in at our expense build outs at the sycamores, which are just slightly further along the road. The road actually narrows towards the sycamores. There is actually room for 3 lanes of traffic on that section, including the parking outside the market park, which is on the opposite side. So the loss of parking here can be an issue, certainly on occasion. So I'm just trying to avoid the council having to pay for something as a consequence of us giving consent to these houses. So I'm just trying to avoid us having extra expense further down the line.
Probably what I'd say in relation to that, this has been looked at by our road service, and the arrangements that are in place are deemed to be appropriate for the situation today. So if we felt that build outs are required to accommodate this, then we'd be asking for that now, which is not the case.
Okay then, Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Convener. Sorry to dwell on this. Just going back to my previous point about the missing trees, the loss of trees, and the fact that there's enforcement action being taken. Can we include a condition that needs to be agreed an acceptable resolution settlement for the loss of the trees before granting this? Thank you.
I think that the issue in relation to that is it's not within the application site. So to apply a condition that relates to land that's out with the application site wouldn't be able to be enforced, therefore wouldn't be competent. So this is, and again, I'm not 100% sure personally the ownership situation, but I'm not sure it's even the same person that's involved in this application as to who is the owner of the land beyond the access, which is where the trees have come down. What I would also say is, just to correct a word, we're having an enforcement investigation to see what the situation is. We have not taken any formal action at this point.
Yeah, my previous question was any of this done, the tree loss, the tree felling, whatever it was, done to facilitate this? And Paul couldn't answer that. What I'm trying to get to, if the tree felling was done to facilitate this, we should be getting to a resolution before we allow anything, if it's for the driveway especially. Thank you.
I think, as we said, we're not able to answer that question. We don't know. That would be a question for that party, and we will be investigating that as we are doing at the moment. But I can't conclude anything at the moment. As I say, I don't even know if it's the same landowner as we're dealing with here.
I can certainly understand where Councillor Allen's coming from. The trees that were felled, you know where they are, where. Can I ask the question, were any of the trees that have been illegally felled or potentially illegally felled, were they inside the red boundary on the map?
No.
Thank you. Any more questions? No questions. Can I ask for a motion? Okay, I'll put forward a motion. I'll put forward a motion for planning permission to be granted, subject to the report of handling and the amended conditions. Bailey Williamson, you want to second?
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. Any amendment? Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I would like to propose a motion to approve the application, but I would like either a condition or a suspensive condition that build out should be built on the Muirs as part of this development, should it prove possible.
Can I have a seconder? No seconder. Amendment fails. Is there any other amendment? No other amendment. Therefore, planning permission is granted, subject to report of handling and the amended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you again. Next application today relates to a particularly attractive infill site at Seaside to the southeast of Grange near the banks of the River Tay. The proposal is to erect a dwelling house upon a site which had previously benefited from planning permission for a larger dwelling over 2 stories, but which was not implemented. In this instance, it would result in a contemporary solution on site, and other contemporary solutions have been successfully delivered, including on the site to the west. A total of 7 letters of objection have been received to the proposals as outlined in paragraph 30, but relates to the belief that the proposal is contrary to development plan, as an inappropriate design, has impacts on residential and visual amenity, impacts on road safety and also on noise. After careful consideration and some amendments to the siting of the built form, it remains to be the view that this is an acceptable form of development, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. I'll now take members through a short presentation. Next slide, please. This first plan shows the location of the site at the southeast of Grange and Errol Airfield, close to the banks of the River Tay. The adjacent properties, of which there are 6 dwellings, with 1 to the west and the remaining 5 to the east, are in a staggered or step fashion. Access is taken over a distance of just under 1 mile from the site, close to where the former poultry sheds have been redeveloped at Grange, and it's via an existing private track. Next slide, please. Here we have a proposed site plan for the development. This shows the adjacent stepped arrangements in better detail and illustrates that the density proposed is comparable to those of neighbouring plots. Next slide, please. Now for members, we see the proposed floor plans and elevations of the proposed 3-bedroom dwelling. It also illustrates the use of rendered walls, a standing seam roof, weatherboard cladding and high performance alu-clad windows. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the adjacent ancillary accommodation, which also comprises a workshop. This would have some complementary design themes, although would be largely metal clad. As outlined in the report, conditions can be utilised in respect of ensuring ancillary usage and also restrictions on potential noise impacts. Next slide, please. Next, we see the small-scale summer house building, which had been erected on site. And I will now take members through a series of site photographs taken recently by the case officer. Next slide, please. Yep. The first photograph shows the view southwards towards the Tay with Russigg House on the left and Seabank to the right. Next image, please. These next photographs show the view eastwards towards the aforementioned Russigg House and the 2-storey Carthagena Cedars beyond, and on the right is Seabank, which itself is also of a contemporary design. Next image, please. Next, we see the respective photos in either direction from closer to the Tay. Seabank is on the left-hand side this time, and Russigg House on the right. Next image, please. This next image seeks to show the slightly staggered arrangement. As you look eastwards from Seabank back towards the other dwellings, it also shows the use of contemporary design materials in the most recent addition to the grouping, and also the variety in design of dwellings in this area. Next image, please. We now see the small summer house building, which was erected at the southwest corner of the site, adjacent to the landscaped boundary features beyond. Next image, please. And these last images seek the general arrangement of the access track serving the small hamlet. Next image, please. Lastly, it was just to confirm that it's been flagged to us that a condition relating to details of refuse storage required to be submitted and approved, and that an informative should also have been added in respect of highlighting the potential for parts of the private access to be affected by surface water. These would have to be added in addition to those listed within the report should members support this proposal. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. We have deputations on this, so I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call on Ms. Durant? Ms. Durant, good afternoon. You have 3 minutes for your deputation. I will give you a prompt with 1 minute to go, and I'll start the clock whenever you feel comfortable to start. If you need to stop for a drink of water, we'll stop the clock, okay?
Hello, everyone. I'm Nancy Durant, representing myself and my husband, Mark. We live in Russig House, direct neighbours on the east side of the proposed buildings. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today to clarify my objections, which are lack of privacy and residential amenity from the upper terrace of this proposed building. I'm hoping that the committee may review these again via amendments to the east side of the terrace. The 4 plots that are there all benefit from stunning views south and northwards to the east. To the east, we can all gain good views down the Tay, but this is accepted as a lower garden experience. We go to the bottom of our plots and we get a good view down the river. Firstly, I would like the overlooking from the large. Oh, sorry.
Can everybody turn off their microphones, please?
Sorry, Ms. Durant, if you'd like to continue. Maybe you could go back a wee bit. Well,
yeah, sorry. The 4 plots all benefit from stunning views southwards to the Tay and northwards. To the east, we can all gain good views down the Tay, but this is accepted as a lower garden experience. Firstly, I would like the overlooking from the large, deep upper terrace reviewed and possibly closed off as in the west elevation. You'll all be familiar with the diagrams and elevations of design, but I'd like to point out some features I feel are not always obvious. The deep upper terrace is at least 10 metres deep, half the depth of the house proposed from south to north. There are multiple viewing areas to the east and the northeast, one at the 10-metre point, and the other one is at the frontage. It's 5 metres at the frontage, round the corner of the terrace. These are open with a glass balustrade in all about 5-6 metres of viewing area towards our garden and our immediate outdoor space, which faces south. From height, the projection and span of the view is increased. And from the second viewing area, you will see northeast directly over our plot. And we feel that we will be overlooked. As the house is to move about 20 metres northwards to become closer in line to ours, the halfway viewing area will provide a bird's eye view downwards over our garden and patio. We at Russig will be sited between 2 double height or triple height to our left houses, and as we're in a low level build, we will feel vulnerable to a lack of privacy in our garden. We feel this is an excessive need for an extra view east at our expense, with not much regard for our privacy, and we find quite upsetting. It'll be hard for us to screen our patio area as viewing will be from height downwards. Referring to a previous planning application in 2019, with much less sizable balconies. This was granted, but with pre-commencement conditions to close off the east balcony specifically to protect. Oh, right. Okay, sorry.
Is your voice able to take questions from members if they, okay. Members could populate the chat box, please. Ms. Durant, you'll be glad to know there's no questions from members. You're free to go. Thank you. Can I call on Mr. Crawford, objector? Again, Mr. Crawford, 3 minutes for your deputation. I'll give you a prompt with a minute to go. So whenever you're ready, I'll start the clock.
Good afternoon. First of all, may I say looking at the final. Done. Yep. First of all, may I say that the plan that I see in front of me looks to have been adjusted for a third time with respect to the positioning of the house coming south the way. At pre-planning stage, these houses were set out, this is about eight years ago. These houses were set out by Andy Baxter, who insisted that we set the house out within the staggered the position. The first house to be built, Carthagena Cedars, to the right, was the most important house to be built strategically lined. I stay in Seabank at the end, and if you draw a diagonal line between Carthagena Cedars and the end of my house, the proposed site comes way forward. It's probably forward because there's an ancillary house. Looking at this design here, it looks it's been moved back again from what myself, John Cameron, who owns the site, and Andy Baxter. All I'm really looking for, at pre-planning, they insisted that the houses had to be at a building distance. Now we seem to have been inconsistent and one's moved forward. However, I do say that that looks slightly further back. I don't know who's changing it, but somebody's changing it behind the scenes, because two days ago, the south line of the proposed house was actually over. Yeah, my line was there. So it has changed, but it's still, if you project the diagonal line, it falls without the line that we all adhere to. The problem that I see now is the actual plot is up for sale. And whoever buys the plot now, if they change, they probably will change the design to their needs. Are they going to build a house further forward? And houses look totally ridiculous out of place. All we're looking for is consistency for what the planners asked for in the first instance to what we are now. End off. Thank you.
Are you willing to take questions from members? Members put in their chat if they'd like to ask a question, please. Mr. Crawford, there appears to be no questions. Thank you for your time. Could I call on Mr. Cameron, objector to the application? Give me a moment, please. My apologies, Mr. Cameron. Mr. Cameron's the applicant for the record. You have 3 minutes for your deputation. I'll give you a prompt with 1 minute to go in your own time.
Firstly, I'd like to thank the planning officer for the diligence on this, and I'd like to thank everybody who provided input to this. And we certainly didn't mean to upset anybody in the process of putting this planning application in. In terms of the site, the history is that there was a farm located on the site, and there was also chicken houses next door to it. So that's very much industrial in nature and has significant traffic going backwards and forwards. And therefore the installation of houses is probably a net traffic reduction relative to its original use. There was previous permissions put on site, so there was a 2-story house that was taller than the one we're currently applying for. But there was also a 1-story house that had a larger footprint than what we're applying for. With respect to the workshop with the ancillary accommodation, this is the same height as the house, so it's very similar in terms of elevations, and also the structure of it is a nod towards the industrial heritage of the site being a farm. With respect to elevation overall, the house is only 1.2 meters taller than the property to the east and 1.5 meters taller than that property to the west, and has a footprint that would be in the smaller half of the 4 houses. In terms of frontage, we would be in the bottom half as well, with 2 of the properties having larger frontages to the river than ourselves. The design is a blend of the properties to the east and west, so the walls and the finish match the properties to the east, and then the more contemporary roof is a match to the property to the west. And the design is modern, which would be similar to the property to the west. In terms of locations, the house has been placed to the west of the site, which gives us more than 25 meters gap between the house and our boundary, and the distance to the easterly house would be more than that. And then the workshop has very limited windows to the east, which is there to try to provide as much privacy to the house to the east as possible. I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. You're willing to take questions from members?
Yep, please.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Thank you, Mr. Cameron. I'm just trying to address a couple of the concerns by the previous deputies. One of the first questions I'd like to ask you, is the site for sale?
Yes, it is. You're like wanting me to elaborate why it's for sale? No, I have a green light and a red one. It is on. It is on.
So the question really is, if the site's for sale, why do we need detailed planning application and not just?
So Alan, that's not actually a planning consideration.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for clarification on that. You heard what the previous deputies said in their objections. Have you addressed those at all?
We have taken their consideration into, or we have taken their views into consideration. We did work with both of our neighbours to position the house in an area that was agreeable to everybody. We did take the durance reviews with regards to the views outside. We think our proposal where the easterly views is only from an outside terrace is an improvement on the 2-story house that was provided before, which had internal windows viewing over to the garden. Also, the house has moved west in the site, so that increases the gap between us and the eastern boundary. So we're, well over 25 meters from our own boundary.
Mr. Cameron, there's no further questions. You're free to go. We have Mr. Alexander, agent on the telephone. Mr. Alexander, I'll remind you to *6 to unmute your phone. Mr. Alexander, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. You can hear me, obviously. Thanks.
Yes,
Thanks.
Okay, I'm sure you're aware of the procedure. You've got 3 minutes for your deputation, and I'll give you a prompt after 2 minutes. So whenever you're ready, please start your deputation.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing us to speak today. We are the architects who were involved in the project. Just to give you a little background, at the risk of repeating some of the information you've already got. The site is located to northeast of Errol on a vacant building plot, which is approximately 2 acres in area, and that's similar to the adjoining neighbours as well. So each of their properties are roughly about 2 acres as well. So the design consists of a 230 square metre 3-bedroom house built over 2 stories. It also includes ancillary accommodation to support the applicant's extended family when visiting, and workshop facilities for the applicant to support their passion for carpentry. The site previously had planning approval for a much larger 2-storey house, which had an area of 330 square metres. So this design accounts for roughly about 100 square metres reduction in the house area, previously approved. Similar to the neighbouring property at Sea Bank to the west of the site, the design aims to deliver a contemporary architectural style. The design also aims to reconcile the contrasting styles of the neighbouring properties at either side, with a considered choice of external materials and colours, which draws inspiration from both the neighbouring properties at Sea Bank to the west and Roughhead House to the east. As demonstrated in the planning officer's report recommending approval, the application is supported by planning policy and has raised no concerns with any statutory consultees. The design does not constitute overdevelopment of the generous 2-acre site and has no impact on daylight or sunlight to the neighbouring properties and gardens. The proposal will be an energy efficient development built with high quality sustainable materials and present a contemporary design which has an enduring architectural form. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Are you willing to take questions from members?
Yes, more than happy to.
Grand. We've got one in already from Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. One of the deputies who objected to this suggested that the housing agreement was that all the houses would be in a diagonal line, and the previous deputy then said that he had agreed with the objectors on the positioning of the house. Can you just give me some clarity on that, please?
I'm not aware there was an agreement, and I'm not sure whether that is an agreement is something that presumably the planning committee considers. I am aware that John, having spoken to, I think it was to the neighbour to Sea Bank, who were worried about some of the views being disrupted, certainly took the decision to push the building further back into the site to appease them. And as far as I'm aware, they were quite happy with the changes that John and Judith had made in that respect. That's my understanding.
Mr. Alexander, there's no further questions, so you're free to go.
Okay, thank you.
Convener, there's no further deputations, so I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Can I ask committee, do they have any questions for officers? No questions? Oh, Councillor Allen.
we're just basing my question to the officers on the concern of the applicant who suggested that the houses should be in a diagonal kind of correlation. Have we got a view on that?
As you'll have heard many times already during your tenure on this committee, obviously each application has got to be assessed on its own merits. If we have a scenario where there's perhaps been a design brief for a master plan with a site history, then there might be something in play to consider a particular building line. In this instance, we're obviously assessing this application on its own merits and against the considerations of the houses that have gone before it, the house that's been approved on the same site, etc. So it's a judgment call that's ultimately been made in this instance. And obviously, as we've heard today, there has been some adjustment during the application process to move the house slightly further back so as to give a better alignment between the properties, and that remains to be our position on it, that this is an acceptable alignment.
Any further questions? I have one question. One of the deputies spoke about the overlooking on the east side, and the previous development had instigated measures to stop overlooking onto her property. Is this something that we could condition, that the balcony on the east, I think it was the east side is conditioned so that the glass or whatever it's made of cannot overlook?
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, certainly as it outlined in the committee report itself, we've got paragraph 56 outlines that it's 20 metres from that eastern gable to the mutual boundary, and then to the west it's a total of 14 metres. Now, if members note, within the report we have sought to delete or not allow the west facing elevation window at 14 metres. So similarly, if members were minded, we could take a similar stance going forward, but at the same time, we are talking about 21.6 metres from a boundary, which is quite extensive, as you can imagine. So, our mindset remains to be that such a condition isn't necessary, but it's up to members as to whether or not they're so minded.
So, sorry, I think as well, and I'm not sure if one of the pictures, I can't remember now, showed the elevations, but yeah. Sorry, if anybody couldn't hear me there, I think the proposed east elevation drawing shows the arrangement of the balcony. It's partially recessed with walls blocking off parts of the views. I think the ability to further screen that would mean that the wall would have to be built up beyond the level of glazing, but as Mr. Williamson said, the distances to the boundary are well in excess of what we would normally see to be required, and then the distance to the house to the east in itself is quite considerable.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm happy to propose the granting of planning permission as set out in the papers and the recommendations by the officers within those papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor James.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm quite happy to second Councillor Bailey McLaren's proposal. Happy with officers' recommendations. Thank you.
Do we have an amendment? No amendment. Bailey McLaren, can I just confirm that you're happy to grant planning permission subject to the report of handling and the new conditions and informatives?
Yes, Convener. Sorry for the confusion, but yes, I am.
And Councillor James?
Yes, convener, thanks. I thought that's what I was seconding. Thanks.
Thank you. As there is no amendment, planning permission is therefore granted, subject to the protocol happening and the new conditions and informatives. Thank you. Now move on to 524, which is the installation of drainage, floodlights and landscaping works North Inch, Perth. To introduce the report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you again. As has just been outlined, this next application relates to the associated upgrading of pitches 1 to 3 beside the Bell Sports Centre on the North Inch, and also the provision of floodlighting on pitches 1 and 3, with pitch 2 already benefiting from floodlighting columns. This application has been referred to committee in light of the receipt of 2 objections, one of which was from the North Inch Community Council. The matters raised included impacts on cultural heritage, flood risk and drainage, and impacts on ecology and protected species. Concerns were also raised in respect of the common good status of the land. I will now take members through a short presentation. Next slide, please. This first plan shows the location of the site on the western edge of the North Inch, close to the Bell Sports Centre. The red area notes the development site itself, comprising the 3 westmost pitches utilised by Perthshire Rugby Club, but free for wider usage. Next slide, please. Here we have a proposed site plan for the development. This shows the 4 pitches in total in greater detail, with works only taking place to the 3 coloured green. This includes upgrading drainage and the erection of 6 15-metre high lighting columns, each to pitches 1 and 3 respectively, as I mentioned. Next slide, please. Next, we have a light spill plan showing how light spill from the columns can be calculated and how it can be controlled through planning condition. And I will now take members through a series of site photographs taken by the case officer last week. These first photographs show the context of the site in relation to the edge of the North Inch and illustrates the heights of existing trees, rugby posts and lighting columns which already exist. Next slide, please. These next 2 photographs show the existing pitches, posts and columns in greater detail and how wider access across the North Inch is maintained. Next image, please. And lastly, again, this is caveated with an apology. While the associated floodlighting report assessed as part of the application fully considered the height and type of lights and columns proposed, we have not had associated elevations provided. We therefore require an additional condition on top of those listed within the report to require the submission of these details prior to the commencement of the development, should members be minded to approve the application. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. And we have a deputation on this, so I'll now hand back to the Vice Convener for the deputations procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Can I call on Mr. Bruce, agent to the application? Mr. Bruce, I believe you're not doing a deputation, but you're going to be taking questions from members if they so wish. Is that correct? Right.
Yeah.
Members, could you populate the chat function if you have any questions for Mr. Bruce? Mr. Bruce, there's Bailey Williamson.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Bruce, the question is about the floodlighting, and the limitation is for 10 o'clock at night. And I was just wondering if you could explain, is that the optimum time you're going to be using them, or will it be turned off a lot earlier than, say, 9:30, maybe?
Yeah, the intention would be that the floodlights would be used pretty much on the same basis that the existing floodlights are, with training usually finishing about 8 o'clock. So the floodlights would be off by sort of 8:30 after all the equipment's away.
Mr. Bruce, there's no further questions. You're free to go. Thank you. Convener, there's no further deputations on this application. I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, and I'd just like to thank all the deputations today who have stuck around the whole day. Very good of them. Do we have questions for officers? Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, I don't want to get stuck into the sports condition report because I think we'll be here all night, but I disagree with a number of the findings in there. But condition 8, round about the uses of the floodlights, as you just heard, they're anticipating that they're going to get turned off at 8:30 at night. But I noticed the condition says they'll be turned off by 10 o'clock, and I was just wondering if it's possible to reduce that maybe down to about 9 or 9:30 or something.
Ordinarily, I would be at this juncture be turning to Lynn Reid to seek her input, but unfortunately Lynn has had to leave early in respect of a hospital appointment. But obviously any conditions that have been tabled and listed have generally been discussed with environmental health, and that it would have been they who had suggested those timings. If members wish to suggest an alternative, then it's up to them.
Could I make a compromise in it? I assume that, you know, if this application does get approved, then because you're going to have to come back because of the height of the floodlights, is it possible to adjust that condition at that time in negotiation with the developer? Is that a way forward rather than having to recondition it?
I was just going to clarify, we're not having to come back about the height of the floodlights. What's basically happened is everything's just been going on the basis that the floodlights are going to match those utilised on pitch 2 at present in terms of height, in terms of what lighting units are on the top. We just physically didn't have an elevation of them on plan form. So that's what we're seeking through the additional condition.
What I was maybe going to say as a compromise, we could ask for a lighting operation plan to be submitted, and then we could consider that in line with environmental health and approve it or otherwise. But I think at the moment environmental health have been happy with the timings outlined, and I think, as the deputy said, they're just proposing to do the same as they have always done. So I'm not sure if there are concerns with what has happened up until this point.
Thank you. Just from an enforcement point of view as well, just to jump in there, obviously we quite like the flexibility that's permitted in the condition. As we heard from Mr. Bruce, they're often off-site at 8:30, but say for example there's a delay, there's a hold up at the end of it, if they go over by 9 o'clock, then that's a breach of condition, and that would then be a matter for enforcement. So from an enforcement point of view, because as you know I'm also enforcement team leader, we like that flexibility, and I would urge you not to amend it unless you really do see fit.
Problem is, and what's spooking me at the back of my head is somebody just walks away and leaves them on all night. If there's that cut-off point that's a bit earlier in the evening, then there's people around, so to speak. That's the reason I'm putting that in. Okay, we're asking the question.
Yeah, I'm sure, and perhaps the deputy could have confirmed this, that the rugby club, I imagine, who are responsible for paying the bills for the lights, will be making sure that they switch it off at the earliest opportunity to save themselves a penny or two.
Thank you. Any further questions? I will have a question then. The drainage works, it says to take away surface water. How the water table at the North Inch, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure it rises when there's excess water within the Tay catchment area. How is that? Has that been taken into consideration?
As far as I'm aware, yes, it has been taken into account, and obviously what they're wanting to do is extract the existing material that's on site within the pitches to take it down to bare level, and then install various drainage measures on top of that and bring it back to the existing playing field levels. But fundamentally what they're seeking to do is improve the drainage qualities. There is an ongoing maintenance regime that is accompanied within the sports field report that covers what they were required to do on a kind of annual basis in terms of going forward. So as far as I'm concerned, it's been covered.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Bailey Williamson.
Sorry, it's just picking up on the point you made, convener, about the drainage. I think given the surplus of silt in the soil, the potential is the soil may end up getting capped. So therefore, by definition, the drainage might not work because of the content of silt in the soil. So that therefore, try not to sound like an anorak here, I'm really not. But the thing is it does require that regular maintenance, and I think maybe is there sufficient drainage being put in, but I've noticed that the pipes are being put in every 8 meters, so I'm hoping that might work, but it's maybe something for them to consider within their maintenance regime.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask for a motion? Was that from that? Right. That was 3 weeks ago you could put that one on. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I am happy to propose approval of this application as set out in the papers and recommendations by the officers in the report of handling. It is a delight to see some general, what I would call field maintenance, general drainage happening. And this is an investment in a sports facility that is enjoyed by many generations, and is actually a sort of a sports heritage within the centre of Perth. So I would say it's a delight to see this coming forward from the rugby club, the Perthshire Rugby Club. So I'm delighted to put this forward for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, you wish to second?
I'm delighted to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we got an amendment? No amendment. Can I ask for comments? Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, it's just to maybe suggest to the developer they may want to wish to speak to the Sports Turf Research Institute down at Bingley, who may be able to provide some independent guidance on the maintenance of the pitch.
Thank you for that.
I'm content, convener. Thank you.
Thank you. As there is no amendment, planning permission is therefore granted, subject to the report of handling and the new conditions. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We now move on to 525, which is the last local application, and this is for change of use and alterations to public toilets to form banking hub. Banking hub, public convenience, High Street, Auchterarder. And to introduce the report is Mr. Williamson.
Thank you again, convener. The last local application today relates to the proposal to convert the former public toilet block of High Street in order to create a banking hub. By means of a brief background, as part of a budget decision by councillors in March 2023, it was identified that the toilet block in question was deemed surplus to requirements, along with some others in the wider Perth and Kinross area. Since that point, it is understood that a number of potential proposals and occupiers have been mooted. However, the only one which has come forward via a formal planning application is the one before us today relating to the creation of a banking hub. While it's appreciated that this has been quite an emotive topic within the community, the decision to close the toilets has already been taken separately. Therefore, in this instance, the purpose in determining this application today is to consider whether the tabled community use, which would see it utilised for banking purposes, thus meeting an understood need, would be an appropriate land use, would be appropriate from a land use planning perspective. The application has been referred to committee today in light of the receipt of 4 letters of objection, including one from the Auchterarder District Community Council. The concerns raised are listed in paragraph 24, but relate to impacts on parking, the need for a public toilet, other potential sites for the banking hub, and impacts on the desirability of the town as a stop-off location. I'll now take members through a short presentation. This first plan shows the location of the site near the centre of the settlement, just off the High Street in Crown End Wynd. Next slide, please. Here we have a proposed site plan which shows the positioning of this small building near to the car park frontage. Next slide, please. Next, we see a slightly enhanced aerial image showing the relationship of the site to the wider centre of Auchterarder. In addition to the nearby commercial property, there are also a number of residential properties in close proximity too. Next slide, please. Next, we have the respective elevations for the various faces of this box type structure. External alterations would be relatively minor, and a separate application for advertisement consent would be required. Next slide, please. This floor plan shows the premise would comprise a waiting area, counter and office, meeting room, staff room and a staff toilet. And I'll now take members through a series of site photographs taken by the planning case officer. These first photographs show the front and rear elevations of the blockwork built former toilet block, together with the existing bin storage at the rear. Next image, please. These next photographs show the side elevation towards the Niblick pub and also the associated boundary treatment with the adjacent residential property to the east. Next image, please. And this last image shows the eastern gable towards the neighbouring property. Next image, please. Thank you, convener. That now concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson, and we have a deputation on this item. I'll now hand over to the vice convener for the deputations procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Can I call on Ms. Edmund? She's had a very long, patient day. Ms. Edmund, you're a member of the Auchterarder District Community Council and you're objecting to this application. As you well know, you've got 3 minutes and I'll give you a prompt with 1 minute to go. So in your own time.
Thank you. My name is Heather Edmund and I represent Auchterarder District Community Council. We object to the change of use and alteration to public toilets at High Street, Auchterarder, on the basis that this will result in the permanent loss of public amenities to our ever-growing and flourishing town. These toilets, currently not open, have been mothballed since 1st of April 2024 due to Perth and Kinross Council budget cuts. However, the internal fittings of this building contain fully functional public toilets. Should a change of use be granted and all the internal fixtures and fittings, etc., removed to facilitate another use, this would render the commercial viability of any future community-led or charity-funded public toilets on this site both uneconomical and economical and improbable. Once they're gone, they're gone. The current comfort scheme relies on the good faith of local businesses and their continued participation in this scheme, which is neither guaranteed nor ideal, and falls short of what could reasonably be expected by residents of and visitors to the town. The public consultation led by Perth and Kinross Council Communities team in March-April 2024 identified 2 key points. Firstly, 55% of those who took part in this consultation were in favour of public toilets. Secondly, all respondents showed an appetite for both public toilets and a banking hub in Auchterarder. Auchterarder District Community Council and the residents of Auchterarder echo this view. Auchterarder deserves and should have both. We urge Perth and Kinross Council to adopt the same position and be focused on a solution which provides both, not one or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edmund. Are you willing to take questions from members? Members, if you'd like to populate the Bailey McLaren's in there already. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you for your deputation. Very concise. Am I correct in saying that there is currently a temporary banking hub has recently opened within Auchterarder? You know, you're saying there that the community would favour both public toilets and a banking hub. So the location that has been found for this banking hub, is that got possibility of longevity or not? Thank you.
The temporary banking hub opened in the old council chambers in the Eaton Hall about 2 weeks ago. That's a temporary situation, as I understand it. The criteria doesn't meet for permanent situation in that room. There are other options which could and we feel should be explored for the banking hub. There's a number of venues which might be an option. Unfortunately, we, the Community Council, were never privy to the exact criteria for the banking hub, so not really able to answer where else could it go, but we're fairly confident it could go somewhere other than our toilet block, which we would like to not lose.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thank you for the deputation. You mentioned comfort schemes. Do you know how successful they've been as an alternative to public conveyances?
There are two commercial properties in the town who have been part of the comfort scheme since it started. I'd say they've been used because they were used in the winter months when the public toilet was closed. It was only open in the summer months latterly. One was a pub which was open till the evening, and one was a restaurant which was open. So we had, I'd say they would be used, but to what extent I couldn't say. They wouldn't be appropriate for a bus full of football supporters, for example, to go into a restaurant, or potentially for a family to go into the pub. But they are there, and but as I said, we rely on that continuing to be the case in the future if we have no public toilets.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Vice Convener, and thanks for your deputation. Really good. Part of my question has already been answered regarding public facility, but could you tell me, has Auchterarder had banks or branches of banks previously, and are they still open?
Yes, at one point we had 3 or 4 banks, and no, they are no longer open. So the banks left, as banks do, and that was a decision for them. They've now been replaced with the banking hub.
Councillor Harvey.
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned that there's maybe potential other locations for the banking hub. I wonder if you could outline those and their availability, if you have such a thing.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey, we're looking at this application for this building. Could you ask a question about this application and this building, not the amount of buildings that are in Auchterarder?
Oh, okay. Right. Sorry, my apologies. Don't really have a question then in that respect. Thanks.
I do beg your pardon. Thank you. Councillor Braun.
So I just wanted to follow on from Councillor James' question about previous banks. I presume there's a post office in Auchterarder somewhere.
Yes, there is a post office.
I'll tell you why I asked, because I was trying to gauge, obviously, my colleague has said the same and you've said the same, that there's a demand for both. But I'm just trying to see, I suppose in my mind, which would be more of a demand for the building. Would it be a public convenience or a banking hub? And if there's a post office already in the town, I would assume that would take a lot of the business anyway.
I would just simply say that you might need a bank once a month or once a fortnight. You possibly need a public convenience more often than that.
The older you are, probably you do, yes. Thank you.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah. Are there public toilets in the Ayton Hall? And is there any sign of a group that's looking to set up to actually run the public toilets in Auchterarder, or is there a prospect of this happening at some point?
Sorry, Councillor Cuthbert, can I ask what the question is about this building, just like I did with Councillor Harvey?
Indeed, it's the question of whether there's alternative provision and whether this is a material consideration, that this is the only possible location for public toilets.
I mentioned in my piece that there was a public consultation run by the council's communities team, and part of that was there was a local charity who put forward a proposal to run it as an arts social hub with public conveniences, and that was discounted, as we understand, we being the district, the community council rather, on the basis that it wasn't commercially viable, that their business case didn't stack up, and therefore it was discounted. We're simply asking that if the toilet block as it sits today is left as it is, and not necessarily for the council to fund it going forward, but there might in the future be funding from a public body or a charity or some description that to turn it, once it's gone, as I said. And if this proposal came back on the table at some point in the future, it might be viable. It probably wouldn't be if once it's been a banking hub for 2 or 3 or 10 years.
Councillor Allen.
Hi Heather, thank you for your patience waiting all day today. I'm going to ask a question that you'll know the answer to, but I think everybody needs to understand. Is there any objection to there being a banking hub?
Absolutely not. The Community Council's view, and the view of anyone I talk to in town, is that we should have both. The banks have gone. There's a need for banking for both business and personal reasons. Our objection is absolutely not against the banking hub. The exact opposite. Our objection is to the loss of the public toilets forever.
Ms. Edmund, there's no further questions. Thank you for your time. You're free to go. Convener, there's no further deputations, and I'll hand back to yourself.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Again, it's one of these technical questions, I suppose. This application is for a change of use. If hypothetically we were to refuse the application, my understanding would be that the building would go into a limbo. Would that be right? Because it couldn't be used as a banking hub because they haven't got the change of use. It couldn't be used as a public toilet because that decision's been made by another committee elsewhere. So would we effectively have a building that's in limbo? That's the first part of that question. And the second part is, given that it's now in this limbo area, would the question, and it's probably a more difficult question, it's not a planning question, but would this now revert back to whatever other committee made the decision to reevaluate the situation automatically, or would that mean we're just stuck somewhere until someone makes a move on it? Are you with me? It's going to be in limbo initially, but will it move anywhere, or will it just sit there?
I think, Convener, Councillor Braun, the answer to that question is very simple in that you're asked to look at a change of use from toilet or public convenience to banking hub. If there are sufficient grounds to refuse, which is another matter, then that would simply keep it as the use being for public convenience. It will not bring it back into use as toilets because that's a separate consideration. The operation will not come back in. That's a separate consideration for a different committee of the council. Now, you're quite correct, that therefore simply leaves it as toilet use, but not in operation. And that's as far as you can go. You know, anything else is, you know, if you're thinking about what might happen in the future, well, that's consideration elsewhere, if it's to be considered elsewhere. It would be going too far to go down that direction. So the decision today is keep it as toilet use, but not operational, or move to banking hub.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. It's just to follow up on that answer from Colin. If we were to refuse on the basis of the comment you've just made there, and someone in the future came back with a planning application for toilet facility or public convenience, is that something that we could consider?
I think maybe just for clarity, the last and established use of the building is as a public convenience. So unless there were alterations requiring of planning permission, it wouldn't need to come before the council again. I think the issue here is that the owner of the building has decided they want it to be used for another purpose than public conveniences. And we have an application now to permit the use as a banking hub. And that's all that we're considering, whether or not it's appropriately used as a banking hub, and whether it complies with, for example, various policies of the development plan. But it wouldn't need permission to be used as a toilet facility tomorrow.
Just to supplement that, I think where you're going into is straying into other committees' remits, because you know, whether or not something might come back in the future, and the operation of it is not a matter for this committee. This committee is looking at the planning use. So I appreciate where you're coming from. However, it's straying more into another committee's remit, and of course, it's closed at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor James.
Thanks, Convener. My question is along those lines as well, about the use. I've concerns that if there were bank branches in Auchterarder already who closed down, obviously for the lack of business, have we been approached by all the banks, or is this something that somebody's decided we'll have a banking hub, let's go and get a banking hub and then we'll get the banks to come in? And has anybody actually come forward to operate the building as a public toilet, please?
Just to pick up on part of that, as far as I understand from information I've read up on, the applicant represents, I think, 9 different banks overall. So it's not somebody doing it on a spontaneous basis. So they are representing the financial industry from that perspective.
Yeah, and maybe just as from my understanding, it's not that there would be staff from bank A, B, C, D, E, etc. There is staff that would cover the requirements in banking for a multitude of different banks. So it's a one-stop shop in effect, with a singular staffing. Okay. And the second part of your question, can you remind me of that, please?
Yeah, sorry, it was just a request. You know, has anybody requested to run the building as it, or you know, to continue its use as a public convenience?
I think all I can say is that is in terms of the remit of this committee, is that wouldn't require planning permission.
Sorry, could I add that, Councillor James, I think that's straying into another committee's remit. If there were, I don't know the answer as to what actually happened, but if there was a bid process, that would be evaluated by a different committee and wouldn't be the remit of this particular committee.
Yeah, and I understand that has already happened, and another committee of the council has decided that this is the preferred option, or they do not see that it should be retained and operated by the council as a public convenience, but that's beyond the remit of this committee.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Convener, can I just follow up on that? So what I was trying to get to was While I get exactly what you're saying, yeah, it's not the remit of this committee. What is the change of use of this building. And my concern is that we change it to a banking hub. The banks say, okay, it doesn't work. And then somebody later on comes forward to operate it as a public convenience. We then have to reconvert it back to and that would have to come as a change of use to this committee. Yeah.
That's really straying into the unknown, Councillor James. It's I know that the people that are going to be running the banking hub is a non-profit organisation. I know that there was a consultation put out to asking what the public wanted the use of the facility to be. So, but that was another committee. So, any further questions? No further questions. Can I ask for a motion? Bailey Williamson.
Yeah, my motion is to approve the application as per officer's recommendations.
Do we have a seconder?
I'm happy to second, convener.
Okay, Councillor McPherson. I asked for an amendment. I see there is an amendment from Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. I'm minded to refuse the motion on the basis of loss of public amenity, if that's competent.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Allen's amendment. Councillor Braun.
I think Councillor Harvey's going before me. I'm not sure if he's seconded that one or the motion, so you have to check with
He was seconding the one before you.
Okay, I'm happy to second. I think what swung my mind is the request by the deputy that the community wants both. I think this needs to be considered carefully. So if it is a competent motion, I'm happy to second, but that's for Mr. Elliott to decide.
Okay, so far we have a motion from Bailey Williamson, seconded by somebody, Councillor McPherson. There's no written down here. Councillor McPherson, and we have an amendment from Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Braun. Can I ask? I was going to ask for the if anybody wanted to comment. Does any member wish to make comment on the paper? No. Okay. Right. Can I ask if Councillor Allen wishes to sum up?
Yeah, I'd like to sum up on the basis that the loss of the public toilets in Auchterarder would be detrimental to the local community. However, the local community want both facilities. They want a banking hub and they want a toilet facility. And I think that Colin has the wording that allows me to make that in a competent way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bailey Williamson, do you wish to sum up?
Nope, fine.
Thank you. Now I'll hand over to Mr. Elliott to confirm the terms of the motion and the amendment.
Thank you, convener. I think the motion by Bailey Williamson, seconded by Councillor McPherson, is to approve in line with the report. The amendment by Councillor Allen, seconded by Councillor Braun, is to refuse, and I'll give you the terms of that. That's what we're discussing as to the competency of it, what the terms would be. And I appreciate what you've said. The terms of the motion are narrower than what you've said, because that's kind of community wishes. But you have to look at the actual planning policies and see where it fits within the planning policies. But it's refused on the basis that the proposal is contrary to Perth and Kinross Local Development Plan 2, 2019, Policy 16C, Social, Cultural and Community Facilities, as the proposal is not of equivalent community. The proposal. Oh me. Like that? That's better. The proposal was not of equivalent community benefit compared to the toilet use. Now, the comment I would say as the solicitor to the committee is that's going to be a very difficult argument later on to advance should it go to appeal. What effectively you're saying is that toilets are a greater community use than what the banking hub is. So that's not an easy argument to put forward, but it is a competent one to put forward. So
I think.
No comment. That's it. That's it.
So just to remind members that it's motion is to grant, amendment is to refuse.
Okay, Audrey.
Hey members, when I read out your name, if you can let me know whether you're voting for the motion or the amendment. Councillor Allen.
Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Motion.
Councillor McPherson.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
And Bailey Williamson.
Motion.
We have 5 votes for the motion and 5 votes for the amendment. Therefore, the convener has the casting vote.
Thank you. I use my casting vote for the motion. Thank you. Therefore, the planning permission is granted in line with the report of handling. Thank you. We now move on to PANs for the day. I didn't mean that one. Which is, the first PAN is for the formation of an access track, compound, installation of cabling and associated works, land 300 metres east of Tom Breck Farmhouse, Foss, Pitlochry. Any comments on the PAN? Bailey Williamson.
My comments, a couple of comments. First one was about the use of the B8019, which is the Strathtummel Road. I believe that road requires a police escort if you have wide loads on it, and it's about trying to ensure that there's a proper traffic management plan that adheres to that policy, so that if they do have wide loads, they're moving them during the day. I've been told no, you can't answer this, but I suppose asking for a way leave duty is probably out of the question too.
Any other comments on that one? Councillor James, we're on comments rather than questions.
Okay, I'll try and word it as a question. It says it's for a major development, access tracks and installation of, I take it this is for either a battery storage wind farm or some such energy generating facility?
Yes, you're correct. It's for one of those.
Thank you.
Okay, no more comments. We'll go to the second PAN, which is the formation of access tracks, bridge, compound and associated works at land 360 metres north of Glassick Farm, Braco, Dunblane. Any comments on the report? No comments on that report. Councillor James.
Sorry, and again, this one, convener, I kind of find it a little ironic that we're taking a lot of green space to form green energy and have concerns of destruction of some woodland on this one. And have we all, a question I'm trying to get as a comment, do we already have an application for a battery storage wind farm or whatever it is in this site? Thank you.
I can cover that for you, Councillor James. So by way of background, this is associated with the SSE proposal to upgrade Braco substation, which is a national development. The reason this road is required is because the transformers, the size of them, wouldn't fit round the bends that are currently in Braco. So they're looking to do essentially a small bypass to the south of Braco so that they can get the equipment up to the substation. So hopefully that clarifies.
It does. Thank you very much indeed for that. Cheers.
Any further comment? Further comment? There's no other business today, so I would just like to extend my thanks to everyone that's attended today, that's taken the time to come and do deputations. I know that none of them are here now. I'd also like to extend my thanks to the committee members for their servitude in 2024, and also to Jess for her help and with this committee over the last 2.5 years, and wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Thank you.